Welcome to the A-Dub Club, a podcast about sci-fi, fantasy, technology, pop culture, the internet, and general nerdery. I'm recording this on my phone, so it sounds really bad. Apologies for that, but don't worry, the rest of the episode is fine. There are 3 things that are important to know. 1, we occasionally use swear words, but try to stay in the range of PG-13, or at least the kind of R that cool parents are fine with. 2, we may talk spoilers. In this particular episode, we discuss The Expanse, Killjoys, Scream 3, the 2018 Halloween movie, The Bachelor, the MCU, the latest few Star Wars movies, and Hamlet, so be warned. And finally, 3rd, most importantly, James S.A. Corey, the author of the Expanse book series, is not a real person and is actually a pseudonym for the pair Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank. With that out of the way, welcome to the clubhouse. We have snacks. Welcome to the A-Dub Club. My name is Andrew Whipple.
I'm Alex Wade. Welcome to the Thunderdome.
Oh, interesting. We're switching it up now. How are you doing, Alex Wade?
I'm doing good. Doing Dan Delicious.
Dan Delicious. That's not a word, but I like it anyway. I'm doing all right as well. Yeah, last month was an interesting episode. Maybe before we get into this one, how'd you feel about what we did last time?
Yeah, I really liked it. It was fun. Something I haven't done. I haven't really created that kind of art ever. That wasn't for a class assignment. Involuntarily. Yeah, I agree. It was a fun little challenge, and as always, you can listen to that if you haven't listened to it. Our episode, whose name escapes me now, but all about us pitching some ideas for stories in genres that we don't normally like. We got picked up by Netflix. That's great.
Yeah, exactly. We're rolling in the dough, but this time we're taking it old school, and by old school I mean like what we've done for every other episode other than last week's.
From our inception of our podcast, where we came from.
We'll go back to bloviating bullshit about media that we like, and this week our question is, why do you still enjoy bad content?
Yeah, and this question I feel like kind of relates to just in general, we have a lot of content on the internet and in the world of media that we consume that we know is bad, but you do it anyway just because of various reasons that we'll go into. I
think the first thing that this question immediately throws out is that it's so vague as to be almost meaningless, which makes it really fun to talk about. How do you define bad in scare quotes for like bad content?
I think I define bad by a lot of different possible metrics. You can enjoy something for a lot of different reasons. You can enjoy something because of its aesthetics or its acting or its story or production, whatever, right? And I think, bad can be any one of those things, can be poor, and so poor that that like you don't enjoy. That's an aspect of the show that you actively hate or don't enjoy, Like, for example, I'm watching The Expanse right now. And it's an okay show, but it has lots of ships, sci-fi spaceships, and lasers and aliens. So I'm going to keep watching it. But it also has like the main character. One of the main characters of the show is like my least favorite character, Holden, for anyone who's watched it.
Interesting. What about them rubs you the wrong way?
He just doesn't. He's always so intensely angry or passionate and is trying to make a point that you need to know. Okay. And it's like bad acting almost, but also it's a combination of bad acting and bad story, and like his romance is weird and his motivation is weird, and I just don't like him. So it's things like him, and there are other characters on the show that I also think are like just not good characters. There are a lot of moments in the show that are just like bad, and like it's trying to be super serious and with very little silly moments. And I don't know, the thing about sci-fi is you kind of need some comedy in it, in my opinion. I don't know, it just got a lot of issues with the show, but I'm going to keep watching it because of guns and spaceships.
So in this particular case, is it primarily just the aesthetics of sci-fi and of space opera that keeps you watching The Expanse, or are there other things that draw you in as well?
I'd say that's probably like 51% of it, there are obviously there are some characters who I do like in the show. There are some I really, really enjoy kind of all of the side arcs, not the side arcs, but like this one episode that I just watched, there was a character in there who was introduced and killed in the same episode. I really liked his very short vignette story arc. It was high impact, and he was a great, minor character who's like, I don't even know if I definitely don't remember his name, but that was like a really cool aspect of this episode. So that's why I keep going back to it, I think, as well. So it's like I kind of suffer through the main character who I really fucking hate so that I can have all these other cool side stories and also spaceships.
So that's interesting. So is that the sort of thing that keeps you, not just keeps you coming back, but keeps you watching The Expanse as opposed to watching another show or reading a sci-fi book or watching a movie or something like that?
I think it's one of the newest, latest things that's on the market right now. So it's like there's not a bunch of other cutting edge sci-fi shows that I'm also not like already watching.
Okay.
So it definitely fills this violence, war, action, thriller, sci-fi show for me that like I need in my life. And like also there's Killjoys is my other one, but I can't, 2 shows is still not enough for that, because that's like one of my favorite kind of genre things, right? I love Killjoys, and it has very, very few issues.
I'm not familiar with Killjoys. Could you give me a little bit of a primer?
Yeah, so Killjoys is about bounty hunters in a solar system far away, and they kind of get caught up in this master, like, turns out the main character has been bred to be this like alien killer against this weird shadow government that's been happening in the system that's going to take over the whole world, and they're just bounty hunters, and kind of typical space opera gray area of morality and characters who like sometimes they care, sometimes they don't, that whole nitty gritty. Like I'd say honestly it's like kind of a spiritual successor to Firefly, but with a little less charm.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. And a little more violence.
So that makes sense. So I think we've hit on 2 distinct things that I'm kind of interested in teasing apart. There's when it comes to shows like The Expanse and like Killjoys, that it's not just that there are individual things within the episodes and within the show that keep you going within that show despite the bad things that would otherwise push you away. There's also a bit of an element of in the market currently, there's only so much of a particular type of thing. And so if that is your thing that you want to consume for whatever reason, you want to consume as much of it as possible, even if the only examples you're getting currently are of questionable quality.
Yeah. And there's also something about like, why couldn't I just go back and watch TV or movies from the past, right? Like I haven't seen, Babylon 5, or there's a whole list of old television sci-fi that is great that I have not watched. But there's something about new television that's where all the risks are taken, right? Like
interesting.
This season of The Expanse, halfway through, they just got this might be some spoilers.
Whatever. We spoiled
halfway through this season, they just completely shifted the entire focus of what was happening. Like the war got resolved, and the aliens like built a giant ring in between 2 episodes that happened. And like a complete paradigm shift. I was like, wow, that was a really genius like thing to do. Instead of having this war be the entire season, it was half of it. And then they're doing something completely new. And it's like, that's also something that keeps me going, is it's definitely a sense of like what's gonna happen next, because they keep doing things that are so fucking insane that as a story, I'm like, I cannot tell you what the hell is gonna happen next.
Interesting. So is that more, is the thing that engages you more the mystery and the I want to see something new happening, or is it the risk taking in a more abstract sense? And let me know if that doesn't make sense.
I think it's the risk taking because
Okay.
it's less about like, oh, I was on a cliffhanger and they're trying to tease me out, which, every TV show does that. So they are definitely doing that here. But there's a way you can abuse that and there's a way you can not abuse that. I feel like with The Expanse, for me, it's like they keep taking these huge risks that could or could not pay off. And I think that's what it is for me. It's definitely the huge risk of like, sure, in other TV, like Doctor Who, for example, they leave you on a cliffhanger and then the next season they kind of clean it up all tidy and, not necessarily in an interesting, great way that really changes anything. Really, the whole point of that cliffhanger was so that you would come back next time. For this one, it's like there's a complete fucking paradigm shift of how the season's going to progress.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I feel sort of similar with that idea of like I appreciate when things try something even if they fail, more so in general than things that are successful but successful without reaching for anything. I think that I was thinking about recently is one, I have just a giant affinity for the Scream series in general, but I guess this is going to be a little spoilery for a couple different things, but whatever, I'll put it at the beginning. That comparing Scream 3, which is a mess of a movie by every, like, in terms of actual filmmaking, in terms of the script, it's dumb, it's nonsensical, it's overly complicated, whatever. But comparing that to the new Halloween movie that just came out a month or so ago, that there's a lot of similarities and parallels between the two, and Halloween is a much, much, much better constructed movie. Better acting by and large, much tighter script, much more like control of the camera and less dumb shit happens in it. But I have this strong affinity towards Scream 3. And part of it is that both of these are movies that are trying to deal with like intergenerational trauma, and they talk about like, in Halloween, it's all about how, Laurie Strode got attacked by Michael Myers 40 years ago, and now she's, a survivalist prepper waiting for him to return, and in doing so, she sort of ruined the lives of her daughter and her granddaughter.
Sure.
Scream 3 also, it's really dumb that I'm talking about Scream 3 so much, given how stupid a movie it is, but whatever, we're talking about bad movies. Also is really deeply about, like, how Sydney's mom, who was the first victim of the Ghostface killers in Scream, spoilers, how like the things that happened in her life are traumas that are repeated then on Sydney, and Sydney has to live through her mom's trauma, and especially it takes place in Hollywood, and dealing with her mom's past as her attempts to break in as an actor in Hollywood and the abuse that she suffered there, and dealing with Sydney's secret long-lost half-brother, who it turns out is now the killer, and, like, again, it's a mess of a movie. But it does, in the new Halloween movie, really all of the stuff about, like, intergenerational trauma and what is the effect of trauma on people and on women in particular is totally just set dressing, and totally just something that is thrown in there to give the simplest of explanations and backstory for what sort of stuff happens in the movie. It's not wrestled with in any way. Whereas Scream 3, despite being a dumb mess of a movie, actively tries to wrestle with and have something to say, for lack of a better word, about intergenerational trauma, about the predatory nature of Hollywood, about stuff like that. And it's not always successful in doing so, but it tries in a way that Halloween doesn't. And that endears me a lot to it, in a way that I don't have in the much, much better movie that is the new Halloween movie. I also just really like the Scream movies, and I like anything that has Sidney Prescott in it. So
fair. So would you watch Scream again?
Yeah, totally. I haven't yet, but I would definitely be interested in rewatching Scream 3. But yeah, I think overall that idea of, even if you're not successful in it, if you tried something within reason, that will make it at least a more interesting thing to watch and more fun to watch than something that is and again, I like the new Halloween movie a lot. I think it is a good movie, but in comparison to a much worse movie, I like the worse movie more because it tries more stuff. Also, total side note, Carrie Fisher has a phenomenally great cameo in Scream 3 that is like one of the funniest. She basically plays herself, but never says it as much, and it's amazing.
Okay, so I guess what about like things that don't take risks? For example, reality television is very calculated and has very specific goals in mind. I guess is a way to phrase it.
Interesting.
So why I know you watch some reality television? I do not.
That's what I was going to ask. I was curious if you have.
I have watched before some of The Bachelorette when my roommate's girlfriend was over, and I hated how I stayed and watched the whole thing.
Interesting.
It felt bad.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a couple different things at play. One, there are different kinds of reality shows. So, like, this week I've been watching a lot of old seasons of Iron Chef, for instance, which is like,
sure,
it's a different kind of competition shows and stuff like that. I think are a little bit of a different caliber than something like The Bachelor, and also presumably different. I don't have much experience watching like Vanderpump Rules, the Kardashian shows, stuff like that I think have their own separate. I don't know enough about them to be able to say anything one way or another on them. But yeah, I think specifically talking about stuff like The Bachelor, I haven't been watching it as much this year, but the last couple of years got really big into it. And I think those are a good example of something that is like you said, it's the metastasized version of the play it safe, but play it safe by doing all the things that perfectly hook into your brain, like using all of the tricks in such a way that it makes you engage. Like you even said yourself, you hated it, but you stayed and watched the whole thing, and then you hated yourself for having stayed and watched the whole thing. And I think that's definitely an element of stuff like that, is that they are really well executed with the specific goal of doing nothing more than keeping you engaged and watching it. And they do that really well.
Short of like putting porn in there,
Yeah, exactly. And then, I guess that's a different sense of bad, of like, in comparison to the kinds of things that are poorly executed but interesting, this is something that is really, really well executed, but kind of gross.
And why do you still watch it? Like, what are the reasons why you watch it, given all the negative shit?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's a combination of it's fun, like so it's one of those things that if you can turn off your brain and just say like I think it fulfills a similar role that something like an Iron Chef or a more competition based reality show, or in that it's engaging enough to be like, yep, I'm just gonna watch this and this is fun. I think also this is not something that's great about myself, but I think The Bachelor in particular has this weird sort of meta level on top of it where you can get into this weird headspace of, oh, I'm watching it, but I know all the ways that it's bad. I'm actually watching it because I like seeing the threads. I like seeing the ways that they're manipulating people. This is I like sort of playing the level of the game on top of the show that I'm actually watching. But then at the same time, you're really invested in the show itself. And at the same time, like, you playing that meta game is part of the structure of the show and part of the fan base that it creates, of like,
sure.
The Bachelor fully supports Bachelor fantasy leagues, for instance, now. And stuff like that's something that ABC is playing into when they are creating the show. So I think there's an element of that. It's fun to turn off your brain and watch something that's dumb and just be like, whatever, I'm going to watch something dumb. It's also then fun if you're someone who doesn't turn off your brain and says, actually, I'm being smart about it and I get to feel smart because I'm, not taking it at face value. Yeah. I'm thinking really smart about it, but then you're still playing into it anyway. So yeah, I think on the balance, it's not good. And that's part of why I've tried to pull myself away from it a little bit more, especially like in the last couple of seasons as they've been more aggressive about trying to produce things callously for drama and for ratings, especially in the ways that they've been shitty about like non-white characters. I even call them characters, non-white contestants on the show, and like playing into callously playing into some racial stereotypes and stuff like that. That makes for a technically good show, even though it's like it's the content equivalent of like Juul e-cigarettes that are okay. Sure, you're doing a really good job of making those, but it's not good for you.
No.
So I think if we're looking at like the examples that we've talked about so far, there's stuff like The Expanse that is has some flaws in terms of how it's made, in terms of how it's constructed. It's more that you are drawn in because of aesthetic things that are within it, and it does some things that you like in your media, and you're interested in some particular characters' arcs. There's something like Scream 3 that still has aspects of that, of like part of why I like it is that I like the Scream movies, I like slasher movies, I like horror movies in general, even if they're not great, if it does a good job at being scary, whatever. Though, this might be a tangent that I'll cut out, but it was an article that I read, like an essay on Scream 3 that I read, where it was talking about how, like, in defense of Scream 3, but it did include the line, however, I do have to call out that it's a horror comedy that's not particularly scary nor funny. And I was like, yep, that's fair. Anyway, in addition to having like the aesthetic things that I like about the genre, also has, you know, unsuccessfully but tries to have something bigger to say, and takes risks in that direction. There's like that bucket of stuff that it's not technically well made, but I like enough stuff in it, and it gives me enough stuff that I'm willing to keep watching it. Separately, there's the bucket of stuff like The Bachelor that is technically really well made, but gross and morally bankrupt in its existence.
Yeah.
How do you feel when you are consuming one type or the other, or when you're talking to other people about your love of one type or the other?
Yeah, I'd say when I'm talking about my love for things like The Expanse, I understand that, you know, whether or not it's a good show, it clicks for me. Versus like when I'm enjoying, well, I mean, that being said, I don't think I really enjoy much of content that's like The Bachelor, or that is quote unquote bad for reasons of like it's just trying to you know, get these human base emotions riled up in you, right?
Fair.
I think I've striven very hard to kind of cut that content out of my life. I mean, it was never really there to begin with. I feel like I've strived pretty hard to avoid that kind of thing.
Okay. Maybe if there isn't...
It sounds kind of snobby, but, you know.
I mean, sure. But I mean, I think that's fair. And I have... Maybe there's a gradation down from that, of there's the stuff that's like, I think The Bachelor can, especially when it's at its worst, can lean into more of it's like, oh, it's actively harmful, not just
yeah.
But like Marvel movies, they don't have the active harmfulness, but it's they're sort of more of that empty shell. Again, as someone who actually loves a lot of them, I think some of them are pretty good.
Interesting.
There's also an element of like them as the empty shell without much nutritional value.
Okay.
That I think is of a kind with, I think The Bachelor is like the extreme metastasized version of that. But it's difference of degree, not difference of kind. I think, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think something like that would be, in my opinion, Star Wars right now, of like, it's trying to, I'm going to watch every new Star Wars that comes out, and like, I'm going to hope that they're going to start actually fucking taking risks. That, well, I mean, they did in the last one.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say.
Exactly. Which was, but the 3 or 4 of the new ones that I saw that came out, they were, you know, they were kind of this empty shell of like this overly groomed, like trying to set up the perfect comeback of Star Wars. Right.
Interesting.
So I don't really know what I'm trying to say about that, but I'm trying to say Star Wars is The Bachelor.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's interesting, because I kind of feel I put the newer Star Wars movies more into the bucket with The Expanse, of that they, I think, are trying some interesting things, but are kind of messes overall. I think that's especially true for something like Rogue One or Solo, that like are just messes of a movie. They are, especially Rogue One. Like, there is a good version of Rogue One that could be, could have been put together. But that movie just being like, it's like 3 different movies in one.
I think they don't know how to take chances. Like, the chances that they're taking are not paying off because they're still super heavily calculated chances, if that makes sense. So they're kind of like half-assing something different, and that does not pay off. Like, fall flat on your face, or else you can't walk on a tightrope halfway, you know? Like, that's not interesting to see a guy who's like holding on to a rope while he's walking on a tightrope, or that's a bad metaphor, but you know, like some support guide, right?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I need to think about that more because I can't. Because this is not good for a podcast about talking through your thoughts and talking through your feelings about media. But I'm in that space where I emotionally don't agree, in particular because of how much I loved Force Awakens in particular. But I don't have any good rationale or thought as to what is guiding me towards that emotional feeling. Actually, now that I think about it, The Force Awakens in particular is actually one that I would put into the bucket of... Yeah, that was 7. I would put into that bucket of... I think it's a bit of a massive movie, but it's... The things that it does well are the things that like really, really, really work for me in a way that Last Jedi is actually, I think, a better movie overall, is more successful in most realms, but I still like Force Awakens more because I love like it. I love the characters that are introduced. I love the all of the stuff with Rey and the stuff with Finn. I think in that movie is the Rey stuff is actually super successful in Last Jedi as well. But I think. Overall, it's a bit of a mess of a movie, but it does enough things that I really like really well that it endears me to it more than the better follow-up.
Yeah.
How do you think genre, and especially genre stuff like sci-fi, like fantasy, like horror, like things that are sort of cast off from what is traditionally popular or what is traditionally like respected genres, how do you think that plays into this notion of quote unquote bad content?
I think some television, especially for sci-fi, tries really hard to be like this. The only reason why I started watching The Expanse was because of ships and guns, and like I did not like the first 4 or 5 episodes, but like they consistently had space battles or something or some sci-fi thing. So that's something that I feel that's very common in that genre of like, oh, we have to do our fun sci-fi gizmo gadget stuff to keep going.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I guess the reason why I thought about genre is that I'm noticing that part of this is just who we are as people, as you can tell based on the types of content that we've discussed on previous AW Club episodes. Yeah. But that all of our examples so far are ones that are sort of within populist genres. They are, what we're not talking about is the things that are examples of like high art, very literate things that are like in the canon of great movies. We're talking about sci-fi TV shows. We're talking about reality TV. We're talking about horror and slashers.
Yeah.
And so I do think that there is that interesting, like sort of anti-populist lens of like, what is the stuff that is the low genres, and the low genres are quote unquote bad, versus what's stuff that's the high genres, the more literate genres, and those are quote unquote good. When I think that there is something to be said for like, yeah, I'll go toe to toe and say that the first Scream movie is as good as any other. It's a great example within a lowbrow genre, but it's as well constructed and interesting and successful a movie as Pick Your Poison, old classic canonical film.
I mean, sure. Doesn't mean you're right.
I mean, sure. But what are examples? Do you have any examples? I'm going to try and think of some as well of like classically good things that are actually bad.
Ooh, no, but I do have, I guess, kind of the opposite effect of this, of like, what things do you watch because they're bad, or what thing versus what things do you not like that you do watch because they're good.
You're going to need to tease that apart for me more, because I acknowledge the words that you just said, but I don't understand what that sentence means.
Absolutely. So like, for example, I'm trying to think of anything that I've done that's like this. Like, let's say Citizen Kane. I haven't seen Citizen Kane.
Sure.
I know that I need to see Citizen Kane. And like, maybe when I watch it, what if I don't like it? Will I turn it off in the first 20 minutes if I don't like it? If I actually don't like it? Probably not. I'll probably be like, I have to watch this because it's literally called Citizen Kane. It's used as synonymous for the best piece of film. It's like, oh, it's no Citizen Kane is a phrase people say. Like, no, of course I'm not going to turn it off. I'm going to watch the whole thing because of its, because it's good, but not necessarily because I like it.
Yeah, that interplay between the popular canon, the popular conception of what is big and what's important and what matters and what's good, it has a lot of impact on what is our actual like viewing habits and our consumption habits.
Yeah.
I think that may be something to bring up and stake in as an asterisk for some of the stuff we're talking about, is that I think I put a whole lot more stake in what someone personally feels is good or bad, or are the subjective qualities about various pieces of media. I think should matter a lot more than what is the broader consensus around things, in particular because the broader consensus, historically speaking, tends to be very white man centric.
Sure.
And all the shit that goes along with that. But
I think there's like to go back to the example I've been using the entire time, The Expanse. I'm not sure I would have watched season 3, to be honest. If like I'm watching it for a lot of different reasons, but one of them is because, one of the next possible TV shows I can continue watching. Am I going to drop it? Am I not? It got a huge Amazon picked it up because it got canceled, and there was a huge hubbub about that. And now everyone loves The Expanse right now. And I'm like, well, I guess it's decent enough. Maybe season 3 won't be. Maybe I will watch season 3. I wasn't sure. I'm not sure I would have watched it if that hadn't happened. If
that's true, I think that makes sense. And maybe that's a good thing for me to clarify, is that I think there's a difference between stuff like that is a consensus born from a lot of people's individual actual opinions and feelings about the quality of something, versus the I take more stock in something like that than something like, if someone just tells me Citizen Kane is the best movie ever made and they haven't watched it, but they've heard that a lot of people say that it's the best movie ever made, that's different from a bunch of people watch Citizen Kane and tell me, hey, it's really good, you should watch it.
I disagree with that, actually. Like,
okay.
For some piece of literature and art, like Hamlet is like, I'll never say anything. I don't like superlatives, so it is one of, if not the best piece of English writing ever written, right?
Yes, that's true. That's a good point. It's a great piece of English writing because the play is way too long and it's actually not as great as a play as it is as a thing that you read.
Sure.
That is my hot take. That is my spicy take on Hamlet. Macbeth is better as a play in almost every measurable way than Hamlet is.
Sure.
Fight me.
Yeah.
Also, Midsummer sucks.
You know so much more about Shakespeare than me. I get it. But if someone had never read Hamlet and they said that Hamlet is the best piece of English literature ever written, like, I wouldn't, I guess snub my nose at that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's hard. I keep trying to sort of circle the drain of this idea that I don't have full faith in the general worldwide consensus or culture-wide consensus on what makes something good and what makes something bad. And I think all too often it's that the bad things that are in stuff that is canonized, 8-Up Club bingo word, me talking about canonization, the bad things and things that are canonized pushed aside in the same way that a lot of the good things in lower genres are. And I don't know. I feel like, and part of this maybe is just me being a fan of genres like sci-fi and genres like horror that tend to get pushed to the side and not seen.
Yeah.
They're the genuine great pieces of art within them are more likely to be sort of scuttled. But yeah, I don't know. I feel this is bringing up a lot of feelings and emotions in terms of my wanting to defend the horror and sci-fi as valid, interesting genres, which fortunately I think in the movie and pop culture world it does a much better job of that than like the literary world or the academic world that is more likely to be like, sci-fi is not, that's not real literature. It's like, well, no, it might be. Ender's Game's a fucking great book.
Yeah. I'm a fan.
Oh, also, 8 of Club Bingo. We talked about Ender's Game.
Yeah.
This does get me thinking about, so a couple months ago, I went to the XOXO Festival in Portland, which was phenomenal, and I highly recommend it. And I think there are probably some people that I met there that are listening to this. And if so, hi, you're great. But at XOXO, got to listen to Anita Sarkeesian's live taping of her Feminist Frequency podcast, which is a great podcast, and I enjoy it thoroughly. But their live taping, they did a game that was the centerpiece of theirs, which was defend the dumbest thing that you love. And so just, someone picked an episode of Buffy that's particularly terrible. Someone picked a dumb, like, flash in the pan 80s cop show, things like that. So we'll do a briefer version of that. But Alex Wade, what is the worst or dumbest thing that you love dearly?
I feel like that's really hard for me personally because I'm not going to say I take pride in all of my content that I watch. I think it's more of that I have no shame in what I enjoy.
Totally fair. And I think I think in that case, you'll be a great person for this because this is all stuff you would talk about and enjoy anyway. But just the stuff that, like, in the back of your head, yeah, it's bad, but it's great for these other reasons.
Interesting. What?
Like The Expanse. I think I think The Expanse might not, maybe that is your example, but like, yeah, it's bad for XYZ thing, but I love this about it. What is the most extreme version of that for you?
What's the most extreme version of that? I'd say one of my answers is kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but pop EDM.
Okay.
That is something that for me, I have on in the background a lot. That is just kind of keeps my energy like a little bit up, and I guess that's the main reason. Like, I enjoy it too. But even though I know, I find myself really frustrated whenever I like discover a new song, and then either turns out it's like pop hit single for the past 3 or 4 weeks, and like I really loved it, or it becomes that in like a month. And that has happened to me on multiple times, not because I'm like really good at discovering new music, but because the algorithms of Spotify know that I like pop EDM new shit. So I am part of the target mass appeal of that kind of genre of music, which I don't know. Yeah.
Fun. Yeah. What is it about that draws you in and that you enjoy about listening to it?
I mean, it's just the same reason for most pop music of it's, catchy tunes, easy to remember lyrics, and just the not the techno, but like the kind of techno flavor of EDM. I know it's a completely different genre of music, but I don't really know how to describe what the sounds I'm talking about are. That for me is something that I really like. And like, I've never been one to enjoy a lot of pop music stuff. And at first that was 100% because of like superiority complex of music, of like, oh, I'm a snob and I don't listen to music that much, so why should I waste it on crappy pop music? But EDM just hits that spot for me.
Yeah, fair. Oh, okay. I think for me, and caveat, I have not seen it in a while, so maybe I would change my answer if I actually had to sit through and watch it again. I have a total soft spot for Attack of the Clones, the Star Wars movie, which is unquestionably, I think, the worst of all the Star Wars movies. It is a mess from start to finish. So little of it works.
Even more than Phantom Menace?
Much more than Phantom Menace. I think Phantom Menace is actually like half of a good movie. Okay. Whereas Attack of the Clones just it's boring, it's garbage, it looks terrible. It features Hayden Christensen is so bad in it, especially for like the fact that a third of the movie is a romance subplot that is the most poorly written George Lucas attempt at romance dialogue and then woodenly acted by Hayden Christensen. But it was the first Star Wars movie that I ever saw in theaters, and I just have so much like burned into my brain the moments of that movie, especially some of the like the Yoda fight scene is dumb and it's stupid, but if you're like 9 and watching all of a sudden Yoda like do a bunch of bullshit CGI flips, like that looks really cool and that burns into your brain and you like it a bunch. So I think it's a terrible, terrible movie. But I have such a soft spot for Attack of the Clones, almost purely for nostalgia reasons and it being burned into my brain.
That's fair.
And Count Dooku's cool.
Count Dooku is a great character.
Yep. Who then gets summarily killed like 5 minutes into the next movie.
Yeah.
And does nothing. Oh, those movies suck. EDM and Attack of the Clones. Attack of the Clones is the EDM of Star Wars movies, and EDM is the Attack of the Clones of pop music genres. That's not true. EDM is so much better than Attack of the Clones. But
great.
Whatever.
Yeah, that's why I also like... That's the only thing that I have anything close to shame for liking.
Sure. Well, so that's interesting. And that's interesting that you have that reaction, because I think based on the conversations we just had and sort of your reactions to other stuff like that is that you full-throatedly enjoy stuff that might be technically bad, but is in that the Expanse bucket, that Scream bucket of technically bad but interesting and try stuff.
Yeah. And
the stuff that you would actually feel as close to ashamed of is the stuff that, like, EDM is much more the Bachelor of music.
100%.
And that's the kind of stuff that you feel gross about engaging with. Which makes sense. I think that scans.
That tracks with my argument.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about in terms of bad art?
Let's save it for next time. Keep the viewers on their toes. Listeners.
Dun, dun, dun. With that, if you have anything that you want to say about bad art, you can find this podcast at theadub.club. That's theadub.club. There you can also find our topics guide, which has a list of all the different episodes that we did, and based on the stuff that we talked about, we will have another one that we can add to our Scream column. ADub Club, bingo. It's great. You can also find us on Twitter at the AW Club. That's TheAWCLUB. I am bad about tweeting there. I went like a full week forgetting to tweet the latest episode, but whatever. You can also email us at theawclub@gmail.com. That's theawclub@gmail.com. Especially if you have anything that you want to say about any topics in any of our episodes, please email us, because that would be fun. And the whole thing, you can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Google Podcasts. Oh, you can find us on Spotify. I submitted us to Spotify a few weeks back. And we do have a listener that I saw in like the Spotify console that is, I forget what country they're from, but hey, awesome. Thank you for listening to our podcast in Spotify, which I don't understand because I don't like listening to podcasts in Spotify, but
that's cool.
You do you.
I don't think I know a single person who listens to us. Like, I don't think I've had a single person ever be like, oh, that was a cool, which, it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, we do have people that must listen to us. I guess, Let me pull up the pod track. And I know some people who I witnessed them at XOXO hitting the subscribe button at the very least, whether they bounced off after the first episode, that's their prerogative.
No, that's about it, yeah.
All right.
Cool. ADub Club out.
ADub Club out.
Like, subscribe, rate us.
Yeah.
Tell your mom.
Shit.
Not your dad, though. He's on into this kind of shit.
No, he wouldn't like it.
No, like, come on, we get it. everyone has their own things they like. Your dad doesn't like it, you know. Your mom though,
Exactly.
she is so into it.
Yeah. Podcast for moms.
Podcast. That's our new podcast. Remember, this is actually a podcast
That's
idea.
a spinoff. Yeah, this is a spinoff.
Yeah.
A-Dub Club presents Podcast for Moms.
Oh God.